Guyana, this is your Monday edition of the In Perspective show. We want to welcome you to the show today. Thank you for taking time off from your busy schedule to join us. And as you see, we are of course this is a show that is developing from stage to stage from day to day, and therefore we are shifting venues ever so often. The studio is rearranged and relocated ever so often. But today is a very special day. We have a very special guest with us today in the person of Dr. Richard Van West Charles. He is eking out a little bit of his time his from his busy schedule today just to spend a few moments with us. And we don't want to delay him further. So I would like to introduce to you this morning, or reintroduce to you, Dr. Richard Van West Charles, who we know served so reliably in the previous administrations, in the Bonham administration, first of all, and then he assisted throughout um, in other administrations. But today we're glad to have him in our midst. He was the point man at Guywa, the Guyana Water Incorporated for a while, and knows most things as they relate to Guywa. He has been a politician, a formidable politician of that. Therefore, he knows and understands politics in Guyana to a very large extent. And you would remember that he is the son-in-law of the now deceased former Prime Minister and President of Guyana, Mr. Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Dr. Richard Van West Charles, good morning and welcome to the In Perspective show today.
Good morning, Bradford. Good to be here, and I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, today, two things or three things. There are three things that plague us, that bother us, and we would like really to get some, first of all, some professional uh, insight, and secondly, some political analysis. GWI was moving up. There was, just like the GPL, there was a reduced um, number of incidents of low water pressure in the system under your stewardship. The system improved greatly, and there was equitable or there was equal attention being paid to all the residents throughout Guyana as regards to their receipt of potable water. Now we're seeing that we've gone back to the system to state where there is absolutely low water pressure in some areas. Again, what is mind-boggling is the fact that we are noticing that the government has declared that they are planning to improve the system, their developmental works targeting regions 3, 2, 3, 5, and 6. They have excluded the other regions. I think it was 600 or billion Guyana dollars to be spent on those projects. I mean, what is your take on this? What appears to be discrimination as it relates to the approach to the water um, the projects to develop the systems in these communities?
Well, let me say, Bradford, that is coming from the CDB. Now, it the entire work started during our period, and initially the project was submitted with a technological approach that we thought was not as efficient as it would have been, and that the money would have been spent more efficiently using new technology, not the big plants with concrete, etc., that we have now. So we had discussions with the Ministry of Finance in this matter and the Ministry of Communities, and we proposed that we use a different technology, inline filters in particular. Um, and this was some support which came to us from Culligan, the major water company, global water company that is doing some work with us in terms of a number of approaches, as in the instance of Bartica, for example.
Mm.
So, our view, the original proposal was to deal with those regions, and we thought that With newer technology, the money would have been better spent improving more systems across the country, um, in, in terms of, especially where you've got high iron content, and so you have a better quality of water. So it seems as if the administration of today is is not willing to consider new approaches, new technology, and is focused on specific areas that they want to approach. Now, we have made our case. There was an agreement when we met, when we had discussions with the Ministry of Finance and um, the CDB actually,
Mhm.
and hence they obviously have reverted to their old plans, and therefore it's a pity that that will happen because instead of improving rather quickly across the board, you are now going to be spending more money to do that and not using the resources in a most cost effective manner.
So I've observed that the current administration has decided to revert to having some of their previous, I don't want to say mismanagers, but some of the persons they had at the helm of the system of the GWI, they have gone back to them, pulled them back in the system. So Sheikh Bash is back at GWI and he's serving as the what they now term the chief executive officer. And he is now calling, as a matter of fact, it would appear as though he has already launched a forensic audit, as he describes it, into the spendings of the GWI over the past 5 years. He's saying that there is um, an abuse, there's an apparent abuse of the finances, the mismanagement of the finances, and he's going fishing. Is there any reason for him to want to go fishing?
No, look, he needs. You see, when they put out figures, one has to ask what are the elements. So, for example, in overseas travel, I didn't do that overseas travel. Most likely, the elements are related to staff going on conferences, research conferences, staff being trained, etc. So, obviously, we have a different eye in terms of investment in staff, investment in training. And so, we trained many more people uh, during our period than he would have done. But as I said to somebody yesterday, when you have people, you have an old network in Georgetown, for example. Many people are aware of the frequent breakages we had in Cemetery Road, in Church Street, in Vicingen Road, etc. You have workers who've got to work many, many hours beyond the time. These, strange enough, these breakages occur after 4. So obviously you've got to pay these guys, plus you've got to give them their meals, etc. So it is, and you may find meals after these guys would have done the work. Um, you have an they may have an honorarium, but they have worked very, very hard, and you have a thank you, a little thank you function where you say thanks to them for the work they did in bringing things back. Obviously, you have to have some meals there. I don't know all of the elements that they're talking about, but that has been the approach. And if you were to actually pay a firm to do what these guys have done, and I will bet that there's no firm can do what these guys have done as effectively, working with sometimes minimal tools and conditions. But they work to complete the thing in time so that the citizens can get access to water. So they would
Mhm.
work through the night. So if they are not cognizant of these facts, They need to ask the staff. They need to go and see and stop pointing a broad finger in a foolish manner um, to what has gone on. And I am not afraid of the audit. As a
Mhm.
matter of fact, I have the elements of their audit, and that wasn't made available to the general public, and I will. So let us understand that you have a porous net. When let the citizens ask themselves, when APNU AFC came in, how often did we see sewage all over the streets by High Street, by Camp Street, and the amount of work that was done in terms of the manholes throughout the city of Georgetown and replacing covers, etc., etc. During their time, sewage. I mean, the folks will tell you, the staff will tell you, you had a restaurant when they flushed all of the toilet paper just by the post office in central Georgetown.
Wow.
We had to arrest all of those conditions, and he is not concerned about those conditions. I know he's probably he teaches business,
Hmm.
but he needs to get himself informed about the public health requirements of the agency, and address those matters. But we fix those matters. So I don't know where Mr. Bash is going, but the issue is there's a different approach in terms of where how we conducted our work to how he conducted his work. As I said before, um, we reduced the contracting that went on, and we
Mhm.
built in-house capacity and reduced cost, and we trained people. So as I said in the presentation at the press conference, you had a crane. You didn't have a crane.
Hmm.
So if I needed a crane, and very often you need a crane,
Right.
I have to rent it, and every I have to, if I use it for 1 hour, I have to pay for four.
Hmm.
You know, and so those are some of the things. The transportation of staff was all contracted out. We couldn't transport staff effectively because we depended on contractors, and that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of contracting.
Hmm.
When you look at the length of time it took to drill a well during their time, and the data is there, and anybody who wants the data can get it. An average of 6 months. We reduced it to weeks when we started bringing the Dutch, then the Brazilians,
Mhm.
and then I sent people. We bought the rigs ourselves, so that we can do the drilling ourselves,
Okay.
and we reduced it. Right now they're using one rig in the interior, and that is where we sent people overseas to Oklahoma. I sent a team on 2 years successively to um, get an orientation to well drilling, etc. And that is how that work is going on.
Hmm.
When he referred to the rig in Georgetown having the wrong mud pump, he doesn't know what he's talking about, because the mud pump was used to drill the farm well, which went down. He said the mud pump could only go to 300 feet. The mud pump went to the farm well to over 840 feet. And I don't know which rig he's talking about going up to 9,000 feet. That's it. We drilling for water, not oil.
I have found that these guys speak to primarily speak to a base that is not willing to do research for themselves, but are just continuing to accept this spoon feeding of information. So whatever is fed to them, they believe, and they start ranting and going on at a rate. But he's accusing his predecessor of not. Um, Let me read what he says here. Uh, Bach said there was no reason for the previous management to sole source products through a middleman. and he's referring to Sequest. He's saying that you did not maintain the system on a regular basis, but you depending on some system that you called Sequest. Could you help us to understand what
Yes.
Sequest is?
Let me explain to you. First of all, Mr. Bash should go and read the Petroleum Act because sole sourcing is acceptable when it meets certain conditions in accordance with the Procurement Act, not Petroleum
Procurement,
Act,
yeah, right.
Procurement Act. So our iron, if you look at the wells across the country,
Mhm.
invariably they are in the A sand. You access water through the A sand and the B sands. The B sands have less iron and they are deeper wells. Invariably across the country, the wells are in the A sands right now.
Mhm.
If you look at Essequibo Coast, the water, the highest amount of iron, when it's in the A sand, the iron content is very high. If you look at the Essequibo Coast, you can find some of the highest concentrations of iron in water, which gives the red color to discolor your the water to wash your white clothing, your tiles, your porcelain, etc. And that has plagued the citizens of Region 2 forever long.
Okay.
That occurs in places like Edinburgh, in Berbice, in Ithaca, in Enterprise, a number of places across the country.
Mhm.
Now, when I entered into GWI, the staff had gone to a conference in Miami, a CWWA, the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Conference, which is held, used to be held annually, but because of COVID, is now there's a delay. And at each conference, there's an exhibition,
Mhm.
and the people with respect to Sequest exhibited this thing. I wasn't around then. When I arrived, then the staff at a meeting, a management meeting, we were talking about the issue of the iron, and they mentioned it. A number of tests were done, but it's important to note that this product is used throughout the United States. It's used in Belize. It's used in Bahamas, right?
Mhm.
Where they have, and one of the things with in the consultation, we are touching base with these countries for their experience and advice. So it was decided at that time that we did the trials with it, and it proved successful. At the CWWA conference here in Guyana, the folks had a booth, and they also used it to demonstrate the effect in terms of the sequestration of the iron and allowing the water to be clear when we use it. There is one person who is the agent for the company in Guyana. That person, we bought the product through them. And then we brought it in powder form, and that had to be mixed and distributed across the country.
Okay.
So that is the whole issue of Sequest. I don't
Mhm.
know. And let me say to him, the, the data is there to show that we met these wells with the high iron content in water and people complaining of the staining of their bathroom tiles, their porcelain, and the inability to wash their clothing with the water coming from the tap.
Right.
As a result of that, a lot of the transmission lines are encrusted. So the product also clears the transmission lines, but you've got to do certain flushing, which we hardly ever did before I came.
Mhm.
Because Mr. Bash is not, he does not read and he does not understand many things, and he's out of his depth.
I, I do certainly recall that in my mind, Mr. Bash is somebody who just fishes around for information because I remember interacting with him while I was living at Golden Grove. Well, while I was at Golden Grove, working in the area at the time, when he was Minister of Education, one, and then even when he was in the GWI, when he was the Minister responsible water, housing and water, we had a flood down there, and he came rushing to Golden Grove at the behest of some of his supporters. And one of the things that he came with was some false information as to the source of the water that was flooding the area. And when we notified him of what we knew to be the source, instead of going and research the area to determine what possibility there is that what we were telling him as the local government managers in the area, um, what possibility it is that what we were telling was factual. All that he did was went back to Georgetown and sent somebody and told him, hey, you know what? I believe that the sluice out there needs digging and the channel needs clearing because that is what is causing the place to flood. Whereas the sluice was okay, but the problem was that they had water coming in from the back. So I'm convinced that he's not somebody like you said who reads, but just fishes around for information. However, he's also charging. He's also charging in his statements that, or his allegations that as a result of the internal audit, they have determined that there has been double charging, uh, mixing in transportation, and he, like they usually do, kind of blew a thing and said, "Hey, you know what? Huge sums of monies are involved here in this double charging allegation and all that." He's saying that there was some fictitious charges inserted in transportation invoices, and that caused them to dismiss a whole this whole batch of employees that they have now dismissed. He is claiming that this is one of the reasons why they have dismissed these employees. Can you give us a peep
First of
see into
all,
that there?
if he understands business, double charging, and we have found some suppliers, it could be an error on their part, submitting invoice twice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in one case, we discovered the a collaboration between somebody in finance with one of the suppliers in terms of double invoicing.
Mm-hmm.
So that occurs. That has nothing to do with me. That occurs. So if he highlighted that and that is so, that is so. I can't do anything about that. I can't say it doesn't exist, but it has nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
But it happens in normal businesses where people may, due to some error, double invoice. Um, so that could not be a reason for the dismissal of people. How many people do you think work on these invoices?
So I'm wondering.
You know, it's 300. How many people do you think work on these invoices? Mr. Bash, is ridiculous to suggest that that is a reason for the dismissal of many employees. But, you know, it has to deal with uh, his eye and understanding in terms of the level of service that we ought to give customers and the quality of service that we ought to give. And if he understands the distribution system has three components: the physical integrity of the pipes, etc., then the hydraulic integrity to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that you have enough pressure and flow within the pipes, and then the water quality. Now, he doesn't understand where the issue of craftsmen come in with respect to the physical integrity and the hydraulic integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he would glibly send these people off without a proper analysis, analyzing what is the impact at the end of the day of proper water quality to the citizens at the pressure that they have defined of 5 meters uh, to the second floor. Has he met those conditions? No. So he has to understand why. and what is required, and therefore they wouldn't make these rash decisions in moving to fire people.
Hmm. Well,
And as I said before, when you look at our parameters in terms of number of staff per thousand customers, and you make comparisons with other jurisdictions, we are not in an excessive state at all. I mean, I think Barbados has a bit more than us,
hmm.
and it's a smaller territory.
Indeed, by
When, in
far.
terms of the hinterland, where they never tested, and we did over 22 wells in the hinterland, and you have to maintain the system and ensure water quality is there. And you hired people in the region 9 alone, 57 communities, and you hired the craftsmen to look at the physical infrastructure and to do some of the water quality testing. Because we put, for the first time, we put an office in Lethem and a lab in Lethem. Never before. So why would you get rid of those people when you know they have not had access to potable water in a very long time,
Hmm.
and you have to have these guarantees? Does he understand the cost when somebody dies of waterborne disease? The economic cost to the system, to their families, etc.? I don't know whether he's thinking as widely and broadly in terms of the remit of GWI and its understanding with respect to the challenges of development in the country. So he needs to recognize these matters. He needs to does he ensure that the schools, the hospitals, the health centers, that this is where we change things, that the staff have got to go to the schools, the health centers, and the hospitals to look at the access to water. So those are some of the things that uh, which he has to broaden his mind and address them with respect to the mission of the company.
So in your view, as the immediate past CEO of GWI, the entity is not or was not in any way, shape, or form overstaffed, or even if it was excessively overstaffed, that
Of course
demands.
not. Of course not. Of course not. Um, he may not feel that you need an entity like GWI needs a robust communication department,
Mhm.
but you do.
Yes, I do.
Communication is key, and it's only an old world manager would not believe that communication is not important. It is very, very important. So they
Yeah.
need to have the wherewithal to do that, to support, to change behaviors, etc. And there are many challenges that require continuous communication in terms of your customer base.
Mhm.
So those are many things that he has to address, and it requires staff. Even
Yeah.
if he says it doesn't require staff, and he does it properly, you'll have to buy a service. Even if he were to contract,
Uh-huh.
it's money going to purchase a service which is needed.
um, Many persons do not know, and I wanna, at the end of this program, be able to say like Congressman Hakeem Jeffries here, if you didn't know, now you know. So many persons in Ghana do not know until now that the DWI was also responsible, or is also responsible, for managing and maintaining the sewage system in Georgetown. You did allude earlier to the fact that you had to immediately, because that was, I'm seeing that as an emergency when you found it out, immediately deploy staff and make available financial resources, etc., to remove that backup of toilet tissue in the area that you found it. How challenging and how expensive a project is it to manage and maintain this system that is so critical to the health of our citizens in Guyana?
There are 24 pump stations to the sewage system in Georgetown. So invariably, with some of the behaviors, um, some people put all sorts of things into the sewage system, and so they cause damage to many of the pumps and so forth. So you got to replace.
Mhm.
But also, we had to do work on the outfall, where many people who were these large entities collecting sewage and so forth were dumping. And therefore, we had to ensure that it's done properly. We had to put a camera, we had to do many works there. But more so, although our remit on paper is Georgetown, the board, just before we left, was discussing the issue with the Ministry of Communities of us looking at the sanitation sewage across the country. Why? The case in point of Kokwani that is under stress right now. The septic tanks in Kokwani were all broken up. The pipes were all destroyed. There was sewage all over the place. I had to send my staff. I decided as I'm a public health physician.
Mhm.
So I could not knowingly leave those conditions and not address them.
Mm.
So I used my internal staff to do some work. We had to have one contractor because you had to empty the sewage and you had to place it under conditions acceptable. And luckily, we were able to build new septic tanks in that community.
Wow.
Right? If with the flooding that is taking place, that condition that existed before was still there,
Hmm.
God help us all. What would have been the conditions there?
Hmm.
It was filth all over the place because of neglect.
Wow.
But GWI intervened and corrected it. And that's why there was a discussion at the board in terms of whether GWI, with the Ministry of Communities, should not be looking at the system. When we worked on a project with UNICEF, with the Venezuelans and migrants coming across, we worked with UNICEF and the region to put down some toilets for the migrants. UNICEF provided the resources. It is GWI staff.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
adopted the approach and put down the toilets, the hand washing facilities, etc. So he must understand. He tried to find out what was done before running all over the place.
Comrade Charles, you did allude just now to I'm gonna just segue a little to your other the other side of your profession or professional life, I dare say. Um, you are a physician, and you just specified and said you're a public health physician. I think many times what we do in Guyana is just give people what we call half baked or half cooked duck, because we give them one part of the equation and leave the other side out. Now, it is all well and good for us to understand how important the sewage system is to the citizenry. It is important for us to understand how important it is, how important the potable water supply to the residents is. But we do not stop and take the time to analyze or familiarize ourselves with the side effects of us not having these systems in place, so that people don't grasp the full the full impact of the absence of such facilities. Give us an idea what can happen to the community if these things don't exist.
You are right. Let me just give you one other initiative which we we sent staff abroad to learn of a technology by which we can connect the, because you know the sewage system is only for central Georgetown,
Yes.
not for the entire Georgetown. So we sent the staff to the United States to look at a technology that we maybe would be able to connect the septic tanks to the system. Because once we can do that and move it, you see, they're talking about filariasis in the country, and in particular in Georgetown, where the Culex mosquito is high density. And it's
Wow.
all related to the septic tanks in the
Mm-hmm.
main. So what happens is that the other issue is many of these septic tanks are not built according to specifications. So GWI went through the process of redefining the design of the septic tanks that we should be doing across the country, and that is completed.
Okay.
But this guy doesn't know, and it's a pity that because he doesn't know, it's going to be left in some file.
Hmm.
But I hope I'm putting it out now because you know that he never even asked what I did. There was no discussion between himself and myself about what was done.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. He wasn't interested in what was done, whether it was right or wrong, etc. All he's coming now looking at figures. But I hope, because that is a critical issue in terms of the indices of Aedes aegypti and so forth, especially and especially with respect to filariasis and the Culex mosquito in the septic tanks.
Hmm.
So those are some of the things that we had to do, and one doesn't look at, you know, in Georgetown, for example, we take a lot of surface water,
Right.
comes from the conservancy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of activity taking place in the conservancy.
Yes.
So I had to ensure that we have a system of testing the water with a high frequency, 24/7. Introduced not only a central lab, but a lab at Shelter Belt, which tests the water hourly
Okay.
to guarantee the quality of water going out. But you see, the issue is not only the quality of water from source, it's the quality of water in the distribution system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, if you would recall, Bradford, when I started, we were moving and hammering the issue on leaks
Yes.
because that compromises the quality of water, the hydraulic pressure in the system. So people cannot get the water at the end of the line because there are breakages and so forth. So those are things that they've got to, you need staff. You need staff to walk, to search, to look, to go out. And a water utility doesn't operate 20, 7 to 4 in the afternoon. You've got to have people. I introduced emergency shifts across so that people can call if there are breakages. They can go and address them, correct them, so that there are no these delays in the system, and you haven't got the capillary suction of dirty water into the lines.
Hmm. Like you mentioned the mosquitoes that are existing in the various areas as a result of the septic tanks being not being constructed to specification and all that. That is one side, and you did mention some people in Guyana did not probably well. As we said, some of the folks are not really up there, and some don't go research. We spoke about the mosquito that causes filaria. That's one you spoke about. And filaria at one time was a serious problem in Guyana. and we don't want to get back there. Um, what are the side effects of us not having high quality of potable water in the system? I know people get gastroenteritis and so on. Sometimes can the absence of a good quality of potable water lend itself towards a situation where we can have a outbreak of gastro, for example?
Oh, certainly. That's why I mentioned the surface water. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you have Georgetown has its majority of water is surface water. Bartica and Linden, right? Those are the three areas. But then you have a lot of communities. When we took over, the communities along the highway were basically no man's land. So I made a decision. We brought it under the East Bank, but a lot of those communities did not have wells and were taking water from the creeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it is okay to take water from the creeks, but they got to be filtered and so forth to ensure that no microorganisms are in it. So those are things that must be done. And it's not only gastrointestinal issues. Sometimes people come up with a lot of dermatological problems as a result of the water. So um, water quality is central to human existence.
Mm-hmm.
Central. So if you have, and I give you the example, if you have the salmonella in the water that's for typhoid,
Mm-hmm.
and the water is not treated properly, and you make ice, the salmonella doesn't die in the ice.
Hmm.
So that's why water quality is of critical importance to our activities. Critical, critical, critical in what we do, in how we organize, etc.
And by dermatological issues, we talk about
Skin
complications and so on.
conditions.
All right. So you're an accomplished politician, and we want to wrap up now. I know. Remember, you've got to go. You've got to travel out of town. Are we heading close to the 9 o'clock hour? Um, Guyana currently is embroiled in a political turmoil. We can say that, well, not embroiled. It's experiencing this political turmoil. Um, a lot of persons are alluding to the stewardship of your now deceased father-in-law, and indicating that were we in that time, we would not have been in this kind of chaotic situation. You have lived through and worked through all those periods, to his stewardship, to Mr. Hyde's stewardship, to the Jagan Jagdeo stewardship, and now we're here. How would you compare the administration today with those administrations that went before, which saw the PNC slash PNCR slash APNUFC's stewardship in government?
Well, let's start with that. We start from our motto: one people, one nation, one destiny. And I would say the programs in the previous administrations sought greater equity and greater concern across the board, and had deeper interest and concern for the small man.
Mm-hmm.
The way that things are being done now, we operate as if the poor doesn't exist.
Hmm.
When we have 35% poverty in the country, and the needs of those people are not necessarily met, and therefore, those are some of the issues that we have. And I sometimes say that we're afraid as a people to mention poverty. You don't hear it from the diction of the politicians much, but
Hmm.
it exists all around you.
Yeah.
all around. And there is no direct program that addresses the urban poverty and the rural poverty. And so when we talk about squatting occurs because of the poverty situation, the rural-urban drift.
Mm-hmm.
No opportunities within the rural communities, and people thinking there are opportunities at the urban side. So they come, they have to live somewhere, and so they squat. So if we are unable to analyze the paradigm of development where our human capital exists and see that they have the opportunity, and also I think government cannot do everything, but what we've walked away from, even the co-ops and working with people and having capital to support people. Now, many young people would like probably to go into farming and do other things.
Mm-hmm.
But how can we get them involved in the private sector when there is no capital available for them to access to get their businesses going? We had in those days Guy Bank, the Guyana
Right.
Agricultural Bank.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how can we say we are agricultural based and the people who want to get into farming, get into poultry and all of these things, they have no access to capital, they have no access to equipment. Some people can't get access to, if they want to be in rice, because some private farmers do not give them access to equipment to reap their rice.
Right.
So are we serious in terms of development? Because in terms of the land allocation, even if you were looking at the house lots, for example, yes, you're giving out house lots. But what happens with the drainage in the communities, the roads, the utilities? Are these people going to be left on their own? Or are we having a vision of a community and saying, look, I'm giving you 100 lots, you guys in this area. This is the government's remit. The government will lay out the community with you. Okay? These are the roads, the drains, etc. In our day, you couldn't get the transport until your second certificate was had, and means the public health conditions had to be met in terms of drains, roads, etc., utilities, water. But now that doesn't happen. So I think that's a significant difference, both in terms of the conditions under which we live and the opportunities for business in terms of access to capital. And access to capital has to be for everybody, not a few.
True. I want to get in two more questions before we actually we've got 5 minutes to program time. One, there's a certain school of thought that suggests that there is what seems to be ethnic cleansing in Guyana on the part of the PPP administration. So that's why we're witnessing all the axing of so many African Guyanese of African descent from their jobs. And I want to reiterate the fact that you are not just a person pulling straws out of the wind, as your the man who followed you is doing. And some people are feeling that he is intimidated by your stature and status. How do you respond to those people? And then, secondly, as a medical practitioner, what can you say to us to have us, those of us who have not yet locked into this concept of taking a vaccine and so on to protect ourselves against COVID-19?
Right. Okay. Very quickly. Look, I have said before yes, it appears that the first thing that we have to do is to ensure that there's an understanding of the functioning. He has said in their letters, I've seen one or two of the letters, that they are doing a restructuring. I have not seen a restructuring plan. At least you need to ensure and show us what is the restructuring plan, and let us ask questions of you in terms of the people that you are being laid off.
Mm-hmm.
How will the company function? Then we can go for next step to who is being laid off. It may or may not be. In some offices, you have more ethnic representation than others.
Right.
In one office, you may have more Guyanese of Indian descent. In another office, more Guyanese of African descent.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to look at that. But I want to say, as a country, this race question has plagued us significantly. And I believe it is because we have evaded the discussion on race very in a deep manner. And it's not a one-off discussion. It's not a one program discussion. It has to be an approach that allows an understanding of the insecurities on all sides,
Mm-hmm.
and how, as a people, what my father-in-law referred to, how we can get the amalgam going and
Yes.
bring together the attributes of all ethnicities to make the one people, one nation, one destiny.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to have the maturity to have a hard discussion and to understand the insecurities on all sides. And unless we do that, we are going to struggle with this issue more and more. But I think we have to move this discussion also into our schools,
Okay.
into our communities. And we have to find a way of also getting the religious groups, the religious bodies involved in this discussion. Because the structure of our religious bodies are linked also to our ethnic distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to have a serious discussion on it.
Sure. I think so.
And so it may be worth the while. I don't know. Well, I don't think the Ethnic Relations Commission is that involved in that type of discussion.
Okay.
But I think it could be a place where they can start. But the politicians must not feel threatened if a body like the Ethnic Relations Commission goes into a community to have a discussion on race.
Okay.
Especially either one in a community that is predominantly supportive of one political party or another.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is the first signal has to come from the political parties of their willingness to deal with this issue of race. And then we move forward and begin to put things in place to deal with any of the racial problems, discrimination, etc., that are existing in the society. Well, I think we have avoided the discussion for a very too long a time, and we are coming to the point where it must happen now.
True.
With respect to the pandemic, as I said, I want to say that I support the vaccination, and I want to encourage. But I as I said before, I support the vaccination with WHO approved vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why these vaccines are WHO approved. They've got to go through a process established globally. And anyone trying to speed up to launch before another one cannot help us.
Okay.
So I have I have called for a pause on the use of Sputnik. And
Hmm.
I've called for that pause not because I don't believe that the Russians have good technology and are capable people. Once we set out a process for Pfizer, for Moderna, for AstraZeneca, for Sinopharm, for Johnson and Johnson, and they have met that process, well, all other vaccines have got to meet the veil.
Yes.
And there are many other vaccines and are in trials. There are about 15 now in phase 3,
Hmm.
including Sputnik, but they're not
Oh,
approved.
whoa, that's shocking.
So I am saying that we need to take time and let us ask our question. Guyana is a small country.
Mhm.
Why it is the United States, Canada, and Europe took pause with respect to these certain vaccines,
Hmm.
and they have more robust capability to analyze than we do. I just asked them why, because that they've got to, they've got the answer. So
Hmm.
therefore, if we had the robust capability, and we are part of WHO, so we
Yes.
can't say we are part of WHO as all others, and we don't understand certain things. So I encourage vaccination. I do not agree, because people need to understand your children, for your children to go to our schools, they've got to be vaccinated.
Hmm.
I don't understand the fear that we have as a people of the vaccination. I know the anti-vaxxers in North America are putting out a lot of
Yes.
different statements about vaccines, but they've got to understand the science. And I will encourage, especially starting with the people at higher risk, the older people, the people with the comorbidities, to get vaccinated. But what we are seeing also, younger people are being affected and are dying.
Hmm.
So younger people need to be vaccinated also. And we still need to embrace the public health procedures, because variants are occurring all the time. One of the things that can slow down the development of variants is the development of herd immunity by way of vaccinations. Guyana is a country that is on the border with Brazil, Venezuela, and Suriname.
Hmm.
Brazil, the variant that circulated in the surge in India, is circulating there.
Hmm.
That variant is also circulating in the United States. But remember, we have cross border movement.
Right.
Although we're saying the borders are closed, we haven't got the capacity to surveil the border.
Precisely.
So it would seem to me, and also there was a P1 variant in Brazil. So those are things that I'm glad that the government, I've been advocating for some time for Johnson and Johnson. I'm glad the government is getting 150,000 doses.
Okay.
I would hope that we can get more doses of Johnson and Johnson and AstraZeneca, and let us move and vaccinate across the board as
Hmm.
quickly as possible.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richard Van West Charles. I need to um, ensure that I do not find myself in a spot by omitting the fact that you also once served as the Minister of Health of Guyana. So you know what you're speaking about. You know what you're advocating, and people who have an ear need to listen up and pay attention. And like I said, my objective was at the end of the show, if for those of you who are viewing and those who are listening, if you didn't know, now you know.
Well, I served as I had the four ministries together. At one time, I had health, water, housing, and environment.
Hmm. Very, very broad top cap. But that fitted around the head. I'm so happy that we were able to have this sit down and this we say sit down and chat together, Dr. Charles. And I'm happy that you were able to enlighten us regarding some of these accusations that are being leveled against GWI under your stewardship. We're looking forward to hearing what the audit proves, and I trust that they will, um, develop this understanding that Guyana is for all Guyanese, and we've got to take Guyana forward together. And this segregationist policy that they're pushing will not help Guyana in any way, shape, or form. I know you have to um, travel out of up to Georgetown, like I said before. I wish you safe journey to and from your intended destination. Godspeed, God's guidance over you and your family. And we wanna thank you so much for returning to Ghana and giving of yourself so the Guyanese can benefit from your service. Thank you so much, Dr. Charles.
Thank you very much, Bradford. It was a pleasure, and I enjoyed the program.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye bye. All right, so there was it. There we had Dr. Richard Van West Charles, who his immediate past portfolio was the CEO of the GWI, and now having moved on because of the change of government, change of administration, um, Mr. Sheikh Bash, who once served as the minister over that institution, has suddenly found it prudent, suddenly found it necessary to go fishing like the other uh, ministers in the and the other people in the other government agencies have been doing in the past, and looking for a way or a reason to, number one, fire people. And if you notice, Mr. Van West Charles was very professional, very professional in that he did not in any way, shape, or form contribute to the notion that there is ethnic cleansing. He just professionally explained that in some offices you have a greater proportion of one ethnicity as against other offices, and therefore what we need to do is to analyze the the general um, the general intent, the total operation, the operation totality, before we can make that conclusion that there is ethnic cleansing. So, very professional person, and I very sound advice. Again, I'm going to rub it in even harder. Remember, he did say, coming to the end of the program, or at the end of the program here, that he does support the vaccination. He does give credit to the government for ensuring that certain types of vaccines are being made available to the Guyanese or are made available to the Guyanese public. He did indicate that he had been advocating for the longest while for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to be brought into Guyana. And he's happy that it is finally coming to fruition. I hope that the Guyanese who are not yet vaccinated will make full use of this opportunity. 100 plus doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Hey, what more can you ask for? And I trust that the government will not discriminate in um, you know, the use of the vaccines, the distribution of the vaccines. I would want to feel that the Johnson & Johnson would more or less be distributed to right now to the areas that are affected by the floods, because you just need to go there once, give a shot, and the people are covered for the rest of the period that the Johnson and Johnson vaccine will cover them. Whereas with the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer and the Moderna, they've got to go and then go back. So the Johnson Johnson will prevent that from happening. And like I said, it is critical. Like he said, it is critical that we pay attention to the public health crisis that will follow these floods. I've seen that the indications that the water has started to recede in Region 9. I haven't got any report as regards the other regions. This is devastating. The folk in Region 9, unfortunately, are accustomed to, in some areas, high waters, flooding during a particular season. But this area is unseasonal. This area is a catastrophe. This is a major disaster. And, I don't want to get into the politics of it right now, but maybe on Wednesday or maybe tomorrow we'll have a filler show. But how come you giving Upper Mazaruni 600 for relief packages? 600? Now, what can 600 packages do for the people who are flooded out in Region 6? Bartik alone would swallow up that 600. I'm sorry, not Region 6, Region 7. Bartik alone would swallow up the 600. Like, really? Oh, man, look. Anyways, like I said, I don't want to get into politics of it this morning. But I enjoyed the discussion with Dr. Richard Van West Charles. And I trust that you did enjoy. You did learn a lot. And I want to admonish you, when you see the media throw information out there, whether it be figures, whether it be raw, some other kind of data, or some people say data, whatever it is, go and research it for yourself before you jump on the bandwagon and start accusing and beating up people. Those crazy notions that are peddled around the place. Oh, I mean, Mr. Van West Charles under his stewardship, the GWI squandered funds, they wasted millions, and it seems as though corrupt activities took place because they were double invoicing, and you got to go and check first before you start believing these people. Do not be like the others who have lazy minds. They don't want to go and work the brain to get the information. They're just taking it however it comes to them. They are opening their mouth wide and allow the spoon to go in, and they swallow. Hook, line, and sinker. Go and research before you start beating up on people. All right? Let's not lose hope. Guyana is on the move. I just wish that more of our politicians can be more outspoken and more proactive in their approach to the development of Guyana and the preservation of the rights of the peoples of Guyana. Peoples meaning all six races. All six races that we know about as existing in Guyana. All six. The preservation of the rights of all our peoples, and to ensure that all privileges that are accorded to one set of people are accorded to the other set. As Dr. Charles said, Guyanese need access to funding so that they could develop. Individually, they could develop themselves. The community would eventually be developed. The regions would eventually be developed. And ultimately, Guyana will be developed. The funding must be available not just to one set of people, but to all the people. Thank you for joining me today on this edition of the In Perspective Show. I trust you have a wonderful day. Don't get into any trouble. Remember, like I always say, put a little Jesus in your life. If you don't believe in Jesus, ensure that you accept the teachings of your religious following, whether it be Allah, He's God. If you're a Hindu, ensure that you follow it to the letter. But listen, for me, I just love Jesus, and I follow Him all the way. Put a little Jesus in your life, and God will bless you. I think I made a statement on was it Friday or Wednesday, when I had our guest. The name is gone from me now. It just was there. It's gone now. But the female guest that we had there, our female politician friend, who would like to be considered for the presidency. I did say at the end that I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and I don't care who wants to come out at me for doing this. And I get the impression, the afterthought, when I reflected on the reaction of my guest and her response, I get the impression that she probably misinterpreted what I was saying to mean that I don't care about those who criticize me for saying that I'm a Seventh-day Adventist and whatever else came after. That was not the intent. The intent was to say that I don't care about those people who criticize me for being a Seventh-day Adventist and doing this program because there are a lot of people who feel that as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, yes, Miss Thomas, thank you very much, Gloria, Adriana Thomas. The intent was to indicate that there are a number of persons who feel that as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, I should not be engaged in this type of activity, having interviews with politicians and that kind of stuff. And I was saying there, I don't care about those who feel that I ought not to be doing it. This is a public service that I'm doing. It will come to an end sometime or the other because I am not going to go on like this forever and ever and ever, exhausting myself with no gains to it because it's not easy to come home from work and then jump into this here. Before, if you notice, my eyes are droopy there. Sometimes when my eyes are literally shutting down. But I just do it to ensure that Guyanese are appraised of what's happening in and around our country. All right, so that was the intent. If any person, anybody here, has contact with the honorable and distinguished lady, or she herself is on watching, please accept my apologies if that was the understanding. I get the impression that it may have been interpreted to mean that I have something against other Christian churches, and that's why I went on to say I have Baptist pastors and uncle. I have a cousin who's he's not even a pastor anymore, he's a reverend, and the cousin is a reverend in the Nazarene church. So I don't have any beef with anybody from any other denomination. I just say get to know God. I like Billy Graham. Billy Graham said, go to a Bible believing church in your neighborhood. That's my main thrust. That's my main thrust. So whether you're Baptist, Adventist, Assemblies of God, Nazarene, whatever, just know God, worship God, get some God in your life. And as we're about to leave, observe the public health cautions, social distance in Guyana in particular, where the virus is on the rise. The incidence of positive cases is on the rise. Social distance, wash your hands and your face, please. Wash your hands frequently. And they said for 70 seconds, wash it with warm water if you can. And then you also wash your face because your face is exposed there all day. And you need to wash off whatever might be connected to and hanging in there. All right. Have a wonderful day. God's richest blessings to you. See you again by God's grace and His will on Wednesday morning when we have another edition of the In Perspective show. Until then, I'm out.